Kathy Richards was diagnosed with multiple myeloma 6 years ago at the age of 57, a debilitating cancer that affects the plasma cells in the blood. Because this cancer affects the entire body, one of the only effective treatments is a transplant of the cells in the bone marrow. Surgeons take out the old cells and replace them with stem cells from one's own body that produce healthy plasma cells. This effective treatment is extremely expensive, so patients must be placed on a wait list to qualify for even a chance of receiving help. Kathy applied for a position on this wait list to receive the treatments, but was denied a spot on the list due to another health concern, her diabetes. She was 63 years old when she passed away 3 months ago on November 28, 2011. She had 3 sons, 9 grandchildren, and 12 nieces and nephews. She was described by many as a generous sweetheart and was the matriarch of an enormous family who depended on her for love. Of course, after hearing about my mom's friend Kathy, many of us sympathize and wonder, how could the makers of the list deny such a sweet woman the treatment that would very likely save her life? Here arises a knowledge issue. Is it ethical for the makers of these lists to be able to play God, essentially deciding who lives and who dies? Roughly 21,000 people were diagnosed with multiple myeloma in 2010. Only half of them survived. Only 39% of individuals with this cancer survive past the 5-year mark. More than 10,000 myeloma stem cell transplants are performed in North America each year. The problem with the medicine and treatments for this disease, however, is how costly they can be, especially if you're over the age of 65. Many insurance companies will only insure up to a certain amount and then will stop giving financial aid. There's no shortage of stem cells because the cells are your own. The shortage is in the amount of funding available for these treatments. So clinics and charities have created a system of wait lists at the county and city level. There are committees that interview people and decide whether the person is eligible to be put on the wait list or not. Some may say that this position gives them some godlike powers. Obviously, there are more people who need treatments and transplants than there are financial donors and organ donors. But is it fair to permit one human to receive your help over another? For these people in need, making their way onto that list is the glimmer of hope. They don't even know if they'll make it to the top in time, how much time they actually have left, or if the transplant will actually work. Now you can understand the anger and frustration that Kathy and her family might have felt when they became aware that she wasn't even eligible to sit on the waiting list. How do the list makers even decide who makes it and who doesn't? Technically, there could be no decision-making involved, and the entire system could be based off of a first-come, first-served basis. Here is another knowledge issue. Is it ethical to base this system off of a first-come, first-served basis? This idea may sound fair to the person who's at the top of the wait list. However, to the person who's new to the list and needs the treatment more than the people who had better timing, this system would seem extremely flawed, and I would agree with them. There are different need levels when it comes to transplants, and to some extent, the list makers understand that. One example, however, in which a first-come, first-served basis is effective and fair is adoption. In that case, there's no life or death aspect, so timing should be taken into account. Clearly, the list makers are in a field that requires them to make important decisions. But what if these list makers made the decisions for the wrong reasons? What if they allowed someone on the list because they knew that that person's financial resources were sounder than another person? All of the people on the list are in need of some form of financial support, but some may have more coverage than others. Would this be wrong though? More income for that clinic that treats the patients means growth for the clinic, and eventually more patients could be helped. If you look at it from that perspective, they're serving the common good. It becomes confusing as to which option will make a greater amount of people satisfied in the end. Another knowledge issue arises here. So do these list makers rely more on their reason to make their decision, or on their perception and emotion? If there are 2 40-year-old mothers with the same financial situation who need the treatment, and I only have 1 spot on the list, I have to make a decision. I perceive that one of the women, Daisy, is an avid volunteer, a loving mother, and is kind to me when I interview her. The other, Bertha, seems constantly moody, rude, and callous to her children. This, of course, being understandable since she has a horrible cancer. Theoretically, it should be a random 50-50 pick of which woman makes it on the list. However, it is more likely that the character I perceive in Daisy will evoke emotion in me and I will end up allowing her on the list instead. There is some reason involved, however, and that will generally take the last stance on the issue. In a situation in which there's a 10-year-old boy and a 60-year-old alcoholic fighting for the space on that waitlist, a class of 87 humanities students will unanimously agree that the young boy who has not experienced a full life deserves the heart, treatment, or kidney. The alcoholic has done it to himself, right? This example paints the picture in our heads of an angelic child dressed in white, chilling on a puffy cloud versus a smelly, dirty, old, alienated drunk passed out behind a dumpster. Although many would agree that logically the child should receive the transplant, I agree with this as well, we must take into consideration that our imaginations can run wild sometimes and we should be careful not to judge so quickly. That alcoholic is someone's husband, father, brother, son, teacher, coach, or even hero. Logic is important to the final decision, but emotion is crucial to keep perspective on things along the way. In another hypothetical situation, a young man, Dave, and an old man, George, are fighting for the heart. Both men have taken care of their bodies, but have hit some bad luck and developed a heart condition. What would the list maker do then? This is another knowledge issue. Is it ethical for age to play a factor in this decision making? Most people would argue that Dave has yet to live a full life and should get that opportunity. George has had a complete life. Just the sense of time in this case would urge most people to give the heart to Dave. Also, many people associate old age with somewhat acceptable withering. Of course, we are all saddened when our grandparents are sick or are becoming frail, but it is all just a part of the aging process. Now say George, age 60, healthy besides his heart condition, is faced up against Kathy for the spot on the waitlist. If we are basing it on likelihood of survival after the treatment, then yes, George would actually be the one to make it on the list. This is a common technique that the makers of the list use to decide between people to allow on the list. But is it ethical? Now there's another knowledge issue. If they spend all the money to do the treatment and save the life and it doesn't work, what have they done all that work for? Yes, you gave the patient and their family hope, but if you knew in advance that they had another health concern and that the odds of their survival was not that high, it was a wasted attempt, unfortunately. And that treatment could have gone to another patient and saved a life. I think the pre-surgery health is very important to take into consideration because it could make or break the outcome. In Kathy's case, I don't understand how a minor chronic disease like diabetes could affect the success of a stem cell transplant, but the doctors must have had a reason. It was a devastating reality for all of her family and friends, and I remember my mom coming home from work and telling me how she had not made it onto the list. At the personal level, it seems like there's an enemy to blame. But there were other people, young adults, people without pre-existing conditions, who would benefit more from the surgery. So is it okay to play God in this situation involving waitlists? Is it ever okay to play God? That's another knowledge issue. In other situations, such as in vitro fertilization, abortion, and the death penalty, I would argue that there is some element of humans trying to play God. In IVF, the doctors and parents are creating life that naturally should not occur. In an abortion, the doctor and the mother are deciding to kill a fetus that naturally should live. In the death penalty, humans have given themselves the right to decide that when a crime is so horrific, life is no longer valuable. Personally, all of these situations to me are somewhat unnatural. In Kathy's situation, I feel a bit differently. Playing God is utilizing the power to decide between life and death. These people are not necessarily doing that. They have the tools to give someone hope, but like I stated before, there is no guarantee that the person will even make it to the top of the list or recover fully if they do receive the help at all. The intentions of the list makers are generally good, I would say. They work for organizations that have the main goal of saving lives, and they probably don't get paid very much. I doubt that their hearts are in the wrong place in this situation. Plus, like I argued before, most of the decisions made are made using reason versus relying on emotion and perception to guide them. Kathy was a great friend to my mom, and I know that she was an amazing mother. Her death was tragic to a lot of people, and I'm saddened to see that she didn't receive the help when she most needed it. But because I believe that the list makers had the best intentions possible, and they created a perfect balance between logic, emotion, and perception, there wasn't much else that they could have done.